The Galactic Peace and Order Council had made a mistake. A monumental, irredeemable mistake. They did not know it yet, of course. No, at this moment, the smug, bureaucratic leaders of the galaxy sat in their grand chamber, congratulating themselves on a job well done. After years of chaos, Grand Arbiter Zalvan declared, his gelatinous form pulsing with self-importance, we have finally captured the most dangerous human to ever plague the stars. The galaxy will sleep easier tonight. A chorus of alien officials, tentacled, scaled, furred, and chitinous, nodded in agreement. The large, circular chamber hummed with celebratory murmurs. They had studied humans for decades, labeled them unpredictable, too erratic for the civilized galactic order. And yet, despite their impulsivity, the Council had never failed to subdue a rogue human. Until now, that is. They had arrested a human. But not just any human. Baba Yaga. Not that they knew his name. Their files were incomplete, inconsistent. The records only referred to him in vague but unsettling terms. Subject displays extreme survival capabilities. No confirmed defeats in recorded combat. Potential anomaly. Threat level unknown. An insignificant footnote in their database. They believed they had arrested a man. A simple, solitary human. What they had done, in reality, was far worse. They had invited their own destruction. The transport ship Virtus 8 sliced through the void, its metallic hull gleaming under the distant light of an orange dwarf star. Inside, in a holding cell of reinforced Corzoid alloy, sat Baba Yaga. Silent, motionless, dangerous. He was shackled, of course. Thick, pulsating binders wrapped around his wrists and ankles, glowing with an energy field that supposedly suppressed muscular response. The alien guards surrounding him had an air of casual arrogance, as though they were babysitting an old man rather than guarding the deadliest force humanity had ever produced. One of them, a reptilian officer named Galactic, leaned forward, his slitted eyes narrowing. Not so tough now, are you, human? He flicked a clawed finger against the binders, producing a dull hum. I don't understand why the High Council is so worried. Your kind is all talk. You're a relic of an overhyped species, nothing more. Baba did not react. His expression was unreadable. His gaze locked forward in that way predators sometimes did before striking. Galactic sneered, clearly expecting a reaction. He pulled out a small, tattered object from a satchel on his belt. A leather collar. So fragile, these little Earth accessories, the alien mused, turning the object over in his hand. Sentimental creatures, you humans. We found this on you. A pet's token, perhaps? A relic of some long-forgotten beast. The guards chuckled. Baba did not move, but the air around him shifted, subtly, imperceptibly. Galactic smirked. Or maybe. Baba tilted his head slightly. It was a movement so small that most wouldn't have noticed it. But the reptilian stopped mid-sentence, his body tensing as if something deep in his primal mind screamed at him to run. A feeling of unease slithered through the chamber. One of the other guards cleared their throat. Galactic put that back. You heard the orders. No antagonizing the prisoner. Galactic hesitated, then scoffed. Fine. He tossed the collar onto the bench beside Baba. It landed with a soft thud. Baba's fingers twitched. A single movement, so subtle, so minuscule, that none of the guards noticed. But the room's energy shifted once more. Tighter, denser, as though something unseen, something predatory, had been awakened. The transport ship continued toward its destination. The guards resumed their casual conversation, blissfully unaware that they had just made their second mistake of the day. Their first had been arresting him. Their second had been touching the collar. And for that, they would pay. In the command deck, Captain Varek reviewed the prisoner manifest, his many eyes blinking in satisfaction. This had been a good day. A historic day. The human was already secured in the lower detention hold, and the Council's directives were clear. Transport him to the maximum security detention station on Corlith Prime, where he would be interrogated and studied. He flicked through the files, trying to understand why so many security precautions had been assigned to this particular prisoner. Human physiology was unpredictable, sure, but nothing the Galactic Order hadn't handled before. The report stated the subject had high combat proficiency, but there were no military affiliations listed, no planetary records, nothing of significance, except a long history of incident reports from various factions. Mercenaries had refused to engage with him. Entire crime syndicates had collapsed following his arrival on their planets. His name had become a boogeyman myth among bounty hunters. And yet, all they had was a single human. Varek exhaled through his breathing vents and shook his head. Paranoia. That was all this was. Captain, a communications officer chimed in, all systems normal. Estimated arrival at Corlith Prime in 2 hours. Good, Varek replied. Ensure all security protocols remain at. The ship lurched violently. A red alarm flared across the control panels. Sir, security breach in the detention hold. Varek's mandibles clenched. How? What happened? The officer's tendrils quivered as he scanned the data feed. We were not sure. The human, he just moved, and the binders. The lights flickered. A chorus of terrified screams erupted over the ship's internal communication system. Then gunfire. A deep, heavy silence followed. A single voice came through the intercom. A whisper. A single chilling phrase. He's out. The command deck froze. For the first time in his long career, Captain Varek felt a foreign, unfamiliar sensation coil in his gut. Fear. He turned to his officers. Deploy every available unit to the detention sector. Now. Yes, Captain. The security feeds flashed with movement. Shadows. Blurred figures. Bodies hitting walls. The guards' weapons fired wildly, but the human, no, the thing, moved too fast. A single frame appeared on the monitor. Baba Yaga, standing over a pile of motionless bodies. He looked directly into the security camera, and he tilted his head. Varek swallowed. His breathing was shaky. May the stars help us. The corridors of Virtus, 8, were painted in chaos. Baba Yaga moved with lethal efficiency. His body was a machine, every movement precise, every action deliberate. He had taken a plasma rifle from one of the fallen guards, but he hardly needed it. Close quarters combat was his domain. He fought like a storm, a blur of motion that the aliens simply could not keep up with. One unfortunate guard lunged with an electrified baton. Baba caught it, twisted the alien's arm, and drove the weapon into its own chest. Another aimed a sonic blaster. Baba dodged, closed the distance in a heartbeat, and sent the guard crumpling to the floor with a single strike. One by one they fell, until none remained. Baba retrieved his collar from the wreckage of the security station. He dusted it off. A brief pause. Then he put back into his pocket. Footsteps. Reinforcements. He turned, his face unreadable. Somewhere deep within the ship, alarms wailed. Somewhere in the Galactic Council, officials stared at their monitors in pure horror. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the galaxy had just realized its greatest mistake. They had arrested the wrong human, and now they would suffer for it. The silence that followed the massacre in the detention hold was thick, oppressive. It wrapped itself around the corridors of Virtus, 8 like a living thing, stretching across the ship, as if the universe itself held its breath. The crew, the officers, the enforcers, none of them had spoken in the last 5 minutes. None of them wanted to. Baba Yaga was loose. Captain Varek watched the security feeds with the grim realization that history was being made. He had never seen a single being move through a vessel with such calculated destruction. The human, if he could even be called that, was methodical, predatory. He didn't waste energy. Every strike was purposeful, every bullet accounted for, every movement tailored to incapacitate. He wasn't a man trying to escape. He was a force of nature unraveling their control. The captain turned toward the bridge crew, his voice sharp and commanding. Initiate ship-wide lockdown. Seal all blast doors. I want an entire battalion between him and the hangar bay. A communications officer's voice wavered. Yes, sir. Our teams have already deployed. They're engaging now. A pause. Another officer swallowed audibly. They're losing. The security feed showed why. A corridor filled with enforcers, armored and armed with plasma rifles, was supposed to be an impenetrable wall. It wasn't. The first line of soldiers had barely raised their weapons before the human was upon them. The camera captured his movement, a blur of efficiency. One soldier's rifle was wrenched from his grasp, turned, and fired into his own chest before he hit the ground. Another aimed a blade-like energy weapon. Baba sidestepped, caught the alien's wrist, and dislocated it in one smooth motion, flipping the attacker over his shoulder. He never stopped moving. One by one, the squad fell. The last remaining enforcer tried to crawl away, his mandibles clicking in sheer panic. He reached for his comms, voice trembling. He's in sector. A gunshot. The screen flickered. Then the hallway was still. Captain Varek exhaled, pressing his claws into the console as he turned to his crew. We have to stop him before he reaches the escape pods. Reroute all available units. An alarm blared across the ship. Red lights flared against the metallic walls, and the central control display flashed a single horrifying message. Primary propulsion system compromised. Immediate course deviation detected. Varek's mind stalled. What in the abyss is happening? An officer frantically scrolled through the data feed. Sir, he's breached engineering. No, that was impossible. Varek turned to the screen just in time to see the last surviving engineers scrambling for cover, their bulbous eyes wide with terror as Yaga dismantled the primary engine controls. The chamber was built to withstand energy blasts, external hacking, and even controlled explosions. It was not built to withstand Baba Yaga. With calm efficiency, the human plunged a stolen blade into the ship's primary conduit, sending a cascading series of failures through the propulsion systems. The entire vessel lurched. The crew staggered. Gravity fluctuated. Then the ship plunged into a nosedive. Chaos erupted across the bridge. Officers scrambled to stabilize their positions. Screens flickered erratically as emergency systems fought to adjust course. The intercom system crackled with the panicked voices of enforcers who were trapped, cut off, or dead. He's locking down the escape routes, an officer shouted. Another screamed, weapon systems are offline. Varek's mandibles tightened. His voice cut through the hysteria. Where is he going next? The security feed flickered. Baba Yaga was standing at the armory door. The bridge fell deathly silent. The armory was built like a fortress within a fortress. It housed everything from advanced plasma carbines to exotic war tech confiscated from across the galaxy. Baba Yaga breached it in 20 seconds. 2 guards, clad in heavy armor, made the mistake of assuming their protective plating would stop him. It didn't. The first was disarmed, immobilized, and incapacitated before he could even react. The second tried to activate a personal shield. Baba shot him through the visor. Silence returned. Baba scanned the room. Shelves lined with alien weapons, energy grenades, long-range sniper systems. Some of these technologies were decades beyond human warfare, but that didn't matter. Baba Yaga did not need an advantage. He just needed tools. He took 3 pulse pistols, a combat knife, and a set of shock-dampening boots. The weight of the weapons felt right in his hands, balanced, familiar. A soft hum filled the air. Behind him, an automated security turret activated. It fired. Baba Yaga turned. The plasma bolt missed by an inch. Baba did not miss. His bullet hit the turret's core, frying its system in a single shot. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The armory, once an impenetrable vault, was now just another casualty. He reloaded. Then he moved. Captain Varek had run out of ideas. Status report, he demanded, his voice a low growl. An officer whimpered. Sir, he's heading for the primary hangar bay. A chill ran through the room. Varek's claws curled. Deploy everything we have left. They had one final line of defense. The Aegis Elite Unit, a team of warriors trained for galactic-level threats. They were enhanced, augmented, unbeatable, and in 3 minutes they would be dead. The captain watched as the security feeds displayed the inevitable confrontation. The Aegis soldiers took their positions, precision formations, overlapping fields of fire. Their armor gleamed under the cold ship lights. Their weapons pulsed with lethal energy. Baba Yaga walked in unarmed. Varek almost felt a glimmer of hope. Then the killing began. The first Aegis soldier aimed too slowly. Baba snatched a rifle mid-motion, reversed it, and shot the next attacker between the eyes. The second rushed forward. Baba pivoted, drove a knife into his throat, and stole his energy shield before he hit the ground. The remaining soldiers opened fire. Plasma rounds streaked through the air, illuminating the corridor in violent flashes. Baba weaved through the storm, rolling, sidestepping, closing the distance in a blur of lethal precision. He used the stolen shield as a weapon, deflecting a burst before slamming it into the nearest attacker's skull. Another enemy tried to activate an explosive failsafe. Baba shot the detonator out of his hand. One by one, the Aegis elite fell. And when the last soldier collapsed, clutching his ruined armor, Baba kept walking. Varek's throat was dry. His officers were frozen, too afraid to speak. The human reached the hangar doors. The final obstacle between him and his escape. Varek knew the only thing left to do. He activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. The hangar bay was vast, an expanse of sleek starfighters, cargo freighters, and transport shuttles. Baba Yaga did not hesitate. He moved toward the nearest ship, a Galathian-class interceptor. Behind him, the automated voice of the ship's system rang through the air. Warning: self-destruct initiated. 10 minutes until core detonation. Baba Yaga's fingers danced across the controls. He wasn't a pilot, but he had learned enough. Engines roared to life. The hangar doors shuddered open. From the bridge, Captain Varek watched in stunned silence as the human stolen ship shot into the void. A trail of light cut across the blackness of space. Baba Yaga was gone. The countdown continued. The captain closed his eyes. And Virtus 8 exploded. Somewhere in deep space, a stolen interceptor drifted quietly. Baba Yaga reloaded his pistol. His expression did not change. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was already scrambling. They thought they had caught a simple human. Now they would learn the truth. Baba Yaga was coming. The explosion of Virtus 8 sent ripples through the galactic network in mere minutes. Every surveillance drone, every listening post, every intelligence officer within the Galactic Peace and Order Council had watched in stunned horror as the flagship of their prisoner transport fleet bloomed into a fiery wreck, scattering debris across the sector. At first, there was disbelief. How? Then there was panic. It started in the war rooms of the Galactic Council, where diplomats and military leaders scrambled over one another to interpret the catastrophe. Reports flooded in, weapon logs from the ship's final moments, distress signals abruptly cut off, and fragmented security footage that showed the last mistake they had made. They had arrested a human, and now he was loose. In the council chambers, the 12 governing members of the Galactic Order sat around a circular, floating dais, their normally composed expressions marred by thinly veiled terror. This cannot be, Chancellor Vorthus hissed, his segmented exoskeleton trembling under his ceremonial robe. An entire warship has been lost. An entire division of Aegis elites eradicated. And for what? One human. The room fell into hushed murmurs, each official exchanging uncertain glances. Grand Arbiter Zalvan, the oldest among them, pulsed with nervous energy. His gelatinous skin, a deep shade of blue, vibrated as he tapped his elongated fingers against the table. "We need to be rational about this," he declared, voice straining to sound calm. Perhaps the explosion was unrelated. Perhaps. A new transmission cut across the chamber, its priority override flashing red across every holoscreen. The voice of a trembling officer filled the room. He hijacked an interceptor, the officer stammered. He survived. The council chamber fell into absolute silence. Then all hell broke loose. A dozen voices erupted at once, overlapping in a cacophony of alarmed demands and furious accusations. The security chief slammed a clawed fist against the table, mandibles twitching. "Do you understand what this means? He's out there. He knows who we are. Then we must deploy our forces. Another counselor, a reptilian senator, snapped his jaws. Send every fleet we have. We can't let him reach our systems. He already is in our systems, a grim voice interrupted. The room froze. All eyes turned toward a darkened screen as Intelligence Commander Drawl, his avian-like form partially obscured by flickering interference, leaned forward. His beady eyes glowed in the low light. Before Virtus 8 was destroyed, we intercepted a data breach. He exhaled, his feathered crest flattening in distress. He accessed our central registry. Several counselors gasped. He has our names, Drawl confirmed. Our locations. Our defense protocols. It was Vorthis who voiced what they were all thinking. He's coming here. The weight of those words settled over the council like a death sentence. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt fear. Across the Empire, the ripple effect of that fear spread like wildfire. Entire planetary security networks switched to high alert. Border stations doubled their patrols, and bounty hunters across the sector received encrypted messages offering obscene sums of credits to eliminate a single human. In the underground networks, whispers of the unstoppable specter that had torn through an entire warship reached smugglers, mercenaries, and cartel lords. Many of them laughed at first. Then they saw the footage, and the laughing stopped. In the war academies of the Galactic Order, young recruits were shown blurry security feeds of Baba Yaga dismantling the Aegis elite with horrifying efficiency. "This is why you will never be enough," an instructor told them, voice hollow. "Because sometimes the nightmare isn't the unknown. It's human." On neutral planets, traders and civilians tuned into their news feeds, watching as classified government memos leaked into public channels. "A single human has destabilized a council warship," one broadcaster reported. "Authorities urge all colonies to avoid contact with this man. If sighted, do not engage." Across the galactic underworld, the message was clear. Do not hunt this human. Even among bounty hunters, some of the most ruthless killers in the galaxy, there was hesitation. Bounties had been placed on human fugitives before, but never one who had done this. Still, one foolhardy mercenary, a hulking, cybernetic warrior named Craigthal, accepted the contract. He stood in a dimly lit cantina on the outskirts of a war-torn system, surrounded by his crew, boasting about the absurdity of the Council's fear. "I don't care who he is," Craigthal grunted, downing a shot of high-grade fuel liquor. "A human is still just a sack of meat. You put enough holes in it, it stops moving." His second-in-command, a wiry insectoid, tapped his mandibles nervously. "But sir, the reports." "Reports mean nothing." Craigthal flexed his cybernetic arm, the plating glinting under the neon lights. "I'll drag this human's corpse to the council steps myself." The cantina door slid open. A figure stepped inside. He moved without hesitation, without waste, without sound. And when the last of Craigthal's crew hit the ground, bodies strewn like discarded tools, Baba Yaga turned toward the cowering mercenary leader, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Craigthal, shaking, reached for his weapon. Baba shot him in the knee. The towering alien collapsed, gasping, clutching at the smoldering wound. Baba crouched beside him, his voice calm, measured. "Where is the council?" Craigthal wheezed. You're insane." Baba tilted his head. "Where?" The mercenary swallowed, pain and terror evident in his shaking limbs. "Their stronghold. Hyperion Nexus. It's protected by a F fleet." Baba stood and walked away. Behind him, Craigthal shuddered. He had just learned what the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand. You don't hunt Baba Yaga. He hunts you. Back in the council chambers, the final preparations for planetary lockdown were underway. The bureaucratic machine churned in frantic overdrive, emergency measures put in place, security fleets mobilized. The council's seat of power, Hyperion Nexus, was transformed into an impenetrable fortress overnight. Orbital defense cannons were armed. Warships created an iron perimeter around the planet. Every available military unit was deployed. They weren't taking chances anymore. Vorthis exhaled, watching the security feed as the final battleships took their positions above the capital world. He turned to the council, his voice tense but firm. "We are prepared. The entire might of the Galactic Order stands ready." A tense silence settled over the chamber. Then a new transmission came through. One of the outer defense officers, his face pale, his breathing uneven. "Sir W.E." Vorthis narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" The officer swallowed hard. "He's here." The room stilled. Vorthis barely found his voice. "What?" A data feed appeared. "Unauthorized vessel detected. A lone interceptor, drifting toward the planet. No fleet. No backup. Just one ship." The realization struck them all at once. He wasn't running from them. He was coming for them. Vorthis's blood ran cold. The ship's communication system crackled. A voice, steady and deliberate, spoke across the channel. "You took something from me." Silence. "I'm here to take everything back." The transmission cut. The interceptor surged forward. The hunt had begun. The interceptor cut through the void like a blade, its lone silhouette an insult to the fleet amassed around Hyperion Nexus. Warships, battlecruisers, and orbital cannons stood ready, each bristling with weapons powerful enough to obliterate entire armies. They were the finest defenses the Galactic Order had ever assembled. And yet, every officer, every soldier, every strategist watching that single approaching vessel felt a quiet, insidious dread coil in their chests. Because they all knew the truth. They were not stopping a fleet. They were not repelling an invasion. They were trying to stop a man. Inside the command center of the lead battleship, Admiral Koroth flexed his clawed hands against the console, forcing a calm he did not feel. All weapons systems locked onto target. A subordinate reported, voice strained. Koroth nodded. "Destroy him." A wall of energy fire erupted from the fleet, streaking toward the approaching ship like a meteor storm. Plasma bolts, ion torpedoes, and precision-guided missiles swarmed through space, converging on the interceptor with enough firepower to shatter small moons. For a moment, it seemed inevitable. Then the ship moved. Not like a vessel evading destruction, but like a ghost slipping between shadows. It banked hard, darting through the chaos with impossible precision. A torpedo exploded just meters from its hull, yet instead of being engulfed, it rode the shockwave, accelerating into the fray. It rolled, twisted, pivoted mid-flight, weaving through the storm in a way no pilot should have been able to manage. Admiral Koroth felt his pulse hammer against his skull. "What is that flying?" The communications officer paled. "Sir, I don't think it's the ship. It's him." The interceptor streaked toward the flagship's hangar, a missile in its own right. Desperate, Koroth barked his final order. "Close the blast doors." Too late. The ship impacted, slicing through the shield barrier like a scalpel. Metal screeched, hull plating buckled, and in an explosion of pressurized atmosphere, the hangar ripped open. And then, through the fire and smoke, he stepped out. Baba Yaga. He emerged from the wreckage like something out of myth, his silhouette backlit by the inferno, his movements slow, deliberate. A pistol hung loosely in his grip, a rifle slung across his back. His suit, burned, torn in places, was still perfectly tailored, clinging to his form like a second skin. He took a step forward. Every soldier in the hangar took a step back. Then the alarm screamed, and the world erupted in chaos. The first wave of enforcers charged, their fear buried beneath layers of training and desperation. Baba moved, a force of efficiency and brutality. The first attacker raised a plasma rifle. Baba sidestepped, wrenched it from his grip, and fired a shot through his chest before he hit the ground. The next soldier lunged, blade drawn. Baba caught his wrist, twisted, snapped the joint, then drove the same blade into his throat. Another opened fire. Baba grabbed a fallen rifle, fired 2 rounds, took cover behind a wreck fighter, reloaded. He moved seamlessly, his instinct sharper than any combat algorithm. Soldiers crumpled around him, some screaming, some simply falling, their bodies unable to process death before it took them. The enemy kept coming. Baba kept killing. A lieutenant, smarter than the others, activated the anti-gravity field, flipping the hangar into 0G. The sudden shift sent bodies floating, weapons drifting in slow motion. But Baba Yaga was not like the others. He adjusted instantly, twisting midair, using the weightlessness as an advantage rather than an obstacle. He launched off the wreckage, his movements precise, controlled. He fired as he flew, his bullets finding targets with merciless accuracy. A soldier floated too close. Baba grabbed him, spun him around, and used his body as a shield while another enforcer's plasma bolt punched through his back. 0G belonged to him now. By the time gravity restabilized, the fight was already over. Baba landed on his feet. The last soldier tried to crawl away, his plasma pistol shaking in his hands. Baba didn't even look as he pulled the trigger. Silence. The hangar was a graveyard. He reloaded. He kept moving. The corridors of the flagship were a maze of death traps, but Baba moved through them with clinical precision. Automated turrets activated. He dodged between cover, returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. A sentry droid emerged, its reinforced plating shrugging off regular rounds. Baba fired at its joints, severing its limbs before delivering the kill shot to its sensor core. The ship's Special Forces unit waited for him at the command deck entrance. They didn't last long. He was inside. The bridge was chaos, alarms wailing, officers scrambling to override their own security measures. Admiral Karath stood frozen, watching as Baba Yaga stepped into the room, his pistol raised. For the first time in his long military career, Karath felt true helplessness. Baba's expression didn't change. He fired. The Admiral collapsed. The bridge was his now. With measured steps, Baba approached the command console. His fingers moved over the alien interface, accessing the ship's core. Warnings flashed. Bypasses failed. Security walls collapsed. He wasn't here to take control. He was here to send a message. With the press of a button, the flagship's transmission beacon flared to life, broadcasting on every frequency in the system. Across the galaxy, screens flickered. Holograms activated. Every planet, every station, every outpost under the Council's rule saw the same image. Baba Yaga, standing alone in the enemy's command center. His voice was calm, measured. "You took something from me." A beat of silence. "I'm here to take everything back." And then the broadcast cut. The council chamber was in shambles. Diplomats and warlords alike were shouting, clawing at each other, demanding answers, demanding solutions. But there were none. No amount of bureaucratic process could erase what had just happened. Baba Yaga was no longer a rogue human. He was a legend. The fleet above Hyperion Nexus moved into a full retreat. They weren't ordered to. They simply knew. This was over. Baba had already won. Down on the surface, in the highest tower of the Galactic Council stronghold, Chancellor Vorthis trembled as he watched his empire collapse in real time. His species had ruled for centuries. He had orchestrated countless wars, conquered dozens of civilizations. But now he was afraid. A shadow passed over the chamber doors. They opened, and Baba Yaga stepped through. Vorthis didn't reach for a weapon, didn't call for guards. There was no point. Baba walked to the center of the room. He looked at the trembling chancellor. Then, slowly, he knelt. On the floor, a small, tattered object lay where it had been discarded. A leather collar. Baba picked it up. He dusted it off. A long silence stretched between them. Then he looked at Vorthis. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, the chancellor understood. Baba Yaga hadn't come for revenge. He hadn't come for war. He had come for something far simpler. Peace. Vorthis, shaking, gave a single, desperate nod. The war ended that night. The Galactic Council collapsed under its own weight, its systems dissolving as planets declared independence, as entire fleets abandoned their posts. New factions rose, alliances shifted, but through it all, one law remained. Never disturb a human's peace. And somewhere, far away from the ruins of an empire, Baba Yaga sat in a quiet station, a cup of coffee in hand, undisturbed.